Hi everyone, today we're going to talk about the top 5 greatest writers. For me, your mileage will definitely vary, and I also want to hear your favorite authors in the comment section. Please feel free to share with us. Before I start, I do want to mention a couple of honorable mentions. One is Brandon Sanderson. I've read only 2 books by him so far, but I'm loving it, and I would love to explore more of his writings in the future. Second would be George R.R. Martin. I fell in love with Game of Thrones basically after seeing the TV show, and now I'm trying to gobble up everything Westeros related. And Brian Jacques, because after reading Redwall, I just fell in love with the entire world, and I am still aiming to read every single book in the series, which I am ordering very soon. Wish me luck with that. And now let's just start. Let's go ahead. Okay, these are arranged by descending order. From my favorite is number 1, and number 5 is, I would not say not favorite because it's top 5. If you made it in this list, you're the best of the best for me. Okay, at number 5 we have Neil Gaiman. Oh boy, I have read a lot of Neil Gaiman, probably more than some of these other writers on the list. So I've read Sandman, loved it. American Gods, loved it. Neverwhere, also loved it. And of course, Coraline, which is one of the best middle grade novels I've read. And he's really big into the comic book industry. So I used to read a lot of comic books, and he has written a bunch of them that I had no idea at the time, but then found out throughout the years. What I like about Neil Gaiman in terms of writing, all of his works feel like a fairy tale with a very dark twist on that story. And that's very much prevalent in Coraline. And what I love what he did with American Gods and Neverwhere, and even some of his other books that are kind of connect with mythology that we all know, including some modern religions. He basically asks the question, what would their lives be like if they lived today in the modern world? Like if Thor, lived today in the modern world, what would their life be like? And I love the way that he infuses that mythology with a modern mythology, not to spoil some of his works, but it's absolutely amazing. I would highly encourage you go pick up American Gods in specific, because it's one of the best novels I've ever read. I fly through that book like nothing. Okay, number 4 is Howard Phillips Lovecraft. Huge fan of Lovecraft's works. I think in many ways he's the granddaddy of cosmic horror. Honestly, half of the people on this list are inspired by Lovecraft. There's a reason for that. His absolute miserable attitude and outlook towards life pretty much allowed him to write the most disturbing stories ever, and I think in our history. When he really falls behind is his dialogue, which is non-existent, and when it exists, it's really bad. This is clearly a person who doesn't go out much or interact with the world. Besides that, his stories, his lore, his amazing endings, I've realized that many of the stories are just like the best of the best, and I am absolutely inspired by his works, just like many other great authors on this list. Number 3, Terry Pratchett. What an absolute madman. The comedy in his books are, in my opinion, the best comedy ever written down on paper. Comedy is very, very hard to deliver in book form or even in writing form. So for you to achieve that is just such a great accomplishment. And I think Terry Pratchett is the best author / I would call him a comedian, but on paper, not a stand-up. He is famous for his set of books based in the world of Discworld, which is awesome because it's like this flat earth type situation, and there's like 4 elephants under the flat earth, and there's like a giant sea turtle under the elephants flying through space. What an insane world. What an insane cast of fun, strange characters that are so lovable. He seems like a lovable guy. And one thing that I have sinned, honestly, is I have not read Good Omens yet. because both of these guys are Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett are on my top 5 list. I should genuinely stop everything and just go read that book, but I will one day. Eventually I'm gonna get to it, and I'll be emotionally prepared for it, knowing that that's probably the last thing that both of these writers are going to write together, because sadly Terry Pratchett did pass away from Alzheimer's, which is very tragic. Now, number two could have easily been number 1 for me. When I was making this list, I really went back and forward on this one, but I'm going to place him here, and number 2 has to be Haruki Murakami. Wow, in my opinion, he is one of the most accessible authors. The world he creates is so realistic, it's so modern day, but there's a splash of magic or horror or odd fiction and fantasy. And that tiny splash of fantasy, it's almost not the main focus of his works, but that allows for so many interesting things to happen within his books. And the best way I could illustrate that is by recommending you to read 1Q84. 1Q84 is one of the best books I have ever read. What an absolute classic. I'm making a whole dedicated review on it. I love his work so much. I've read After Dark, 1Q84. I am going to be reading Wild Sheep Chase very soon, which I have up there. I've also read The Colorless of I'm not going to be able to spell that name, but I have the book here, and I'm going to reread it very soon because this was one of the most enjoyable reads ever. This is called The Colorless Tsukuro Tazaki. A bit hard to spell for me, but wow, what a book. You would not think I would never imagine I would ever enjoy reading such a dramatic book, but I absolutely love this, and I actually want to reread it very soon. Murakami, an absolute titan in his field, one of the greats, could have easily been number 1, but number 1, I'm going to have to give it to Mr. King. Now, Mr. King is, in my opinion, the greatest writer ever in our history. This is, again, it's my opinion. I know some other people might disagree, but for me, he's the greatest writer ever to bless our pages. I mean, after picking up any book of his, you physically cannot put that book down. It's just he makes you fall in love with these characters so fast and so quick. And what I love about King is that to prove that he's not what you would call a one-trick pony, he wrote such amazing books like The Green Mile, Shawshank Redemption, and Stand By Me. The movie is inspired by one of his short stories, I think from a book called Different Seasons, if I'm not mistaken. He can write realistic when he wants to. He can write even romance. I mean, one of my favorite book of King, you would assume would be horror, but no, it's actually a romance / time travel story called 11/22/63, and it's a subject matter that I could not care less about. But oh my god, did he make me invested in the world, in the character, in the story, and he made me invested by the events of those time periods. And really, from a person who has never stepped his foot in America or anywhere in the western side of the world, he makes you feel like you grow up in the neighborhoods, like you grew up in Derry or all the neighborhoods he mentions, even though I've never been there, but I feel like I've always lived there most of my life because I've read a lot of Stephen King, and every time I read Stephen King, he makes me feel like I'm there with him. Just one of the best, and I actually am interested to see more romance-oriented stuff from King because I think he does romance. One of the best quotes I've read is a person reviewing one of King's books, and he was saying that King's write romance as a horny 13-year-old, and I cannot agree more. The way he writes romance is so genuine, it makes you feel like you're a teenager again, falling in love again. Just the best writer ever we've had. Thank you so much. I would love to hear your opinion, your top 5. Please write it down in the comments. Thank you so much for spending your time with me. Bye bye.